The envelope came on a Tuesday. I recognized the law firm's logo before I opened it. Harding and Cole, the attorneys who had handled my father's estate, the same ones who told me the will had been updated shortly before his death. I hadn't expected to hear from them again, but there it was, a letter addressed directly to me, postmarked weeks earlier. The handwriting was unfamiliar, the ink slightly smudged. I was alone when I opened it, sitting on the back steps of the house that used to feel like home. It was short, just a few paragraphs. My father had created a trust in my name, a 6-figure sum set to release on my 18th birthday. In addition, a small commercial property downtown had been deeded to me. He'd wanted to surprise me. The paperwork had been finalized only days before the accident. I didn't cry, I didn't smile, I just held the letter like it might disintegrate. That's when I heard her heels on the wood. Lorna. She snatched the paper from my hands before I could react. Her eyes moved fast across the page, and for a moment, her face froze. Then she smiled, a cold practice smile I'd seen too many times. "How sweet," she said, holding the letter like it was something sticky. He always had a soft spot for strays. Before I could respond, she flicked open her lighter and held the flame to the corner of the letter. The paper curled and blackened, smoke rising like a signal I couldn't answer. I watched it burn without blinking. That night, she packed a duffel bag with my clothes and shoved $20 into the side pocket. "You're 17, she said. "Old enough to find somewhere else to leech off?" I stood there in the driveway, the porch light cutting through the darkness behind her. "You're not getting a penny," she said flatly. "You were never his real daughter anyway." She shut the door. I didn't knock. I didn't cry. I picked up the bag, adjusted the strap on my shoulder, and walked. I spent my first night on the floor of a 24-hour laundromat. The warmth from the dryers kept the chill off my bones, and no one asked questions as long as I kept to myself. I tucked the $20 bill deep into my sock, afraid to use it. It felt like the last piece of my old life I had left. In the weeks that followed, I learned the rhythms of the street, which shelters filled up first, where to get free breakfast if you didn't mind the sermons, how to keep your head down and your back to the wall. I took whatever jobs I could, bussing tables, folding clothes at donation centers, handing out flyers in the rain, anything that paid in cash and didn't require an address. School was the only place that felt stable. I kept showing up. I borrowed textbooks from the library, studied under flickering streetlights. Graduation was a goal I refused to abandon, not because it would fix everything, but because it meant Lorna didn't get to finish the job. Late at night, when the noise died down and the cold settled in, I thought about my father. I thought about how fast he'd declined after the wedding, how quiet he'd become. The way Lorna always answered for him. "He's resting," she'd say, even when I could hear him coughing behind the door. She convinced him to revise his will, I knew that much. Convinced him I didn't need anything, that I'd be better off out of the picture. What she didn't know was that he had quietly sent a second version of the inheritance letter to his lawyer, just in case. He must have known something wasn't right. I didn't know then that the firm had tried to contact me more than once. Lorna had intercepted everything, but fate, or maybe something better, had let that one letter slip through. She burned it. She thought that was the end, but fire only destroys what it touches. And she hadn't touched my name on the deed. She hadn't touched the bank's records. She hadn't touched what I was becoming in her absence. I wasn't just surviving, I was preparing. It was the third Friday of the month, which meant dry goods at the Saint, Mark's food pantry. I was restocking cans when a soft voice behind me said, "You look familiar." I turned. An older woman in a pressed navy cardigan stood holding a clipboard, her gray hair pulled back neatly. "Sorry," I said. "I don't think we've met." She tilted her head. "Isabel Flores?" I froze. "I used to work for Harding and Cole," she said gently, "the law firm that handled your father's estate." I hadn't heard that name out loud in over a year. I remember your case, she continued. I did clerical work, handled filing. Your stepmother called a few times after your father passed, very insistent about canceling things, but something never sat right with me. She looked around, then leaned in slightly. There was a duplicate inheritance letter. Your father had it sent under your name. It's in the archives, never marked as void. My heartbeat stumbled. I thanked her, wrote down the firm's contact information again, and that night, used my last $10 to print a request letter and take the bus to the office downtown. The receptionist was polite but skeptical until I handed her my ID and quietly said, I believe I have something on file. Isabel Flores. Date of birth, July 14th. She left. 10 minutes passed, then 15. When she returned, she was holding a sealed envelope. It was the same letter Lorna had burned, except this one was crisp, unscorched, and intact. My father's signature was there. His instructions were clear. The trust would be released to me on my 18th birthday. The deed to a small commercial space downtown would transfer with it. I stepped outside and sat on the courthouse steps, staring at the paper. The world around me kept moving. Cars, sirens, pigeons. But inside, everything was still, quiet. Lorna hadn't won. The letter hadn't disappeared. It had just waited. I folded it carefully and placed it in the notebook I used for job leads and class schedules, the notebook that never left my side. I walked back to the shelter that night without eating. I wasn't hungry. For the first time in a year, I wasn't surviving. I was reclaiming. I turned 18 on a Thursday. There was no cake, no candles, just a quiet morning, a borrowed blazer, and a city bus ride to the attorney's office with my letter and my ID tucked safely in my bag. The receptionist didn't recognize me at first. I'd cut my hair since the last time, straightened my spine too. Isabel Flores, I said, here for an appointment with Mr. Colton. He came out a few minutes later, older than I remembered, but with kind eyes and a firm handshake. I wasn't sure you'd come, he said. Not after what your stepmother tried to do. I almost didn't, I replied, but then I remembered what my dad used to say. Fire can't burn what's already yours. He smiled at that, then led me into his office and closed the door. The paperwork took less than an hour. A 6-figure trust, untouched, waiting for me like a secret gift buried under ash. The deed to a commercial property, a small brick building on Halston Avenue, was officially transferred to my name. No loans, no co-signers, just mine. Mr. Colton slid the documents across the table, then paused. You don't need to tell her, you know. I wasn't planning to, I said. He nodded. Smart. I walked out with a folder under one arm and a fire in my chest that had nothing to do with rage. It was clarity, control. I didn't buy anything flashy. I didn't rent a penthouse or post a triumphant selfie. I checked into a clean motel with a kitchenette, opened a private bank account, and spent the afternoon researching investment strategies and commercial zoning regulations. Lorna didn't cross my mind once that day, not because she didn't matter, but because, for the first time, she didn't have power. The world she tried to trap me in was behind me. The world I was building completely, entirely mine. I stood in front of a mirror in that motel room that night and looked at the girl staring back. Same eyes, same quiet, but everything else had changed. I kept the same notebook I'd used at 17, dog-eared, worn at the edges, but still holding my life in pages. Only now, the entries had changed. Instead of job leads, they were spreadsheets. Instead of class notes, business plans. I lived small, studio apartment, secondhand clothes, rice and beans dinners. But I studied hard, took community college classes by day, online business courses by night. My father's trust sat mostly untouched, growing quietly in low-risk investments while I learned what to do with it. The Halston Avenue building was my first real project. It was a squat brick space with a leaky roof and rusted fixtures, but the bones were strong. I didn't flip it. I rebuilt it, piece by piece, floorboard by floorboard, with the same determination that had carried me through shelters and night shifts. When the doors reopened, it wasn't as a boutique or a cafe. It was a business incubator, a space for women like me, women who'd been discarded, underestimated, or silenced. I offered free workspaces, mentorship, and workshops on credit, branding, tax prep. We ran it lean and smart. Some weeks I couldn't afford new signage, but I always had fresh coffee and working Wi-Fi. Word spread. A local news outlet did a small feature. Then a business blog picked it up. Donations started trickling in, then grants. Clients I'd helped began turning into partners. I used that traction to apply for a university transfer. I wrote my admissions essay in the back office between meetings and renovation invoices. It started with one line: I am what happens when someone survives with receipts. I graduated with a degree in business development 2 years later. No fanfare, no family in the audience, but I walked that stage wearing thrifted heels and a quiet smile. Every check I wrote was from an account with my name only on it. Every inch I earned was documented, because I knew, deeply, that people like Lorna don't just disappear. They wait for your spotlight, then step in like they belong. So I built quietly, brick by brick, bite by bite. And this time, no one was burning my letters. By 25, I'd learned 3 things. Growth doesn't need applause. Power doesn't always look like a corner office. Documentation is everything. My name was now listed as co-founder and CEO of Marrow & Slate, a real estate and logistics firm specializing in transitional housing and supply chain support for small businesses. It had started as a passion project, born from that first incubator space on Halston, but quickly scaled when city contracts came calling. We weren't flashy, no billboard ads, no glossy magazine spreads, but we delivered. I had a team of 12, a network of investors who respected my discretion, and a reputation in the local business community as someone who understood how to build stability from the ground up. People asked for my insights. Young founders sought me out. Reporters sent interview requests. I declined most of them, not because I wasn't proud, but because I knew that every ounce of exposure came with risk. My past wasn't a secret, but it was sacred. It lived in notebooks, encrypted drives, and secure cloud folders. I kept digital copies of every lease, every payment, every amendment to the original inheritance documents. I even had screenshots of emails from Harding and Cole confirming the property transfer. I wasn't hiding, I was archiving. Lorna's name hadn't crossed my lips in years, but her shadow lived in the systems I built. I triple-checked every contract. I hired my own legal counsel. I made sure that no one, not a spouse, not a partner, not a charming vendor, could make decisions over my assets without leaving a paper trail. People called it paranoia. I called it protection. Sometimes I walked past the Halston building, now home to 5 thriving women-owned micro-businesses. I didn't need to go inside. Just seeing the lights on was enough. Proof that what I'd built had outlived what tried to destroy me. At night, I updated my files. One folder read simply, Lorna Contingency. It was full of things she'd never seen coming, because people like her bet everything on the idea that the quiet one stays small. They never consider what happens when we outgrow them. It was a Wednesday when the vendor contract came up for review. We were consolidating services, janitorial, security, reception, bringing everything in-house to cut costs and tighten quality. I delegated most of the hiring, but final personnel approvals still crossed my desk. The stack was thick, routine files, background checks, ID copies. I flipped through while my assistant rattled off onboarding dates and badge requests. And then I saw it. Lorna Gates. Same name, same sharp, slanted signature. Position, night janitor, part-time. Application notes, divorced. Recently relocated. Previous employer dissolved due to bankruptcy. My hand didn't shake. My voice didn't waver. I flipped to the next page like nothing had shifted. "Approve this one," I said. My assistant paused. "You sure?" "Positive." She typed it in without another word. I waited until the office cleared out that night before reading the rest of the file. Lorna's address was a basement unit across town. Her emergency contact was blank. No car listed, no spouse, no assets. The fall had been steep and silent, just like she'd wanted mine to be. She had no idea the company she'd applied to was mine. Marrow and Slate had grown since its early days. New branding, new offices, a name not tied to any public-facing profile. I stayed off the press circuit on purpose. She wouldn't have recognized it unless she'd looked. But she hadn't. Of course she hadn't. Lorna never looked past the surface. The irony didn't make me angry. It made me focused. I pulled up the onboarding schedule and saw her orientation had been set for Friday evening. A standard HR packet. Badge access to cleaning zones. No personal office interaction expected. Good. I didn't want confrontation. I wanted clarity. To see what people become when the power is gone and the masks don't work anymore. I closed the file and tucked it back into the stack. I wouldn't fire her. I wouldn't humiliate her. I'd give her exactly what she'd tried to deny me, a job, and just enough rope to realize who was holding the other end. She started the following Monday. I watched from the mezzanine as she stepped through the lobby. Same stiff posture, same clipped walk, but her hair had grayed, and the confidence she used to wear like a designer coat had been replaced by something smaller, hollow. She didn't see me, or maybe she did and didn't recognize me. After all, it had been nearly a decade. I wasn't 17 anymore, standing in a driveway with a duffel bag and $20. I wore tailored slacks now, subtle makeup, and a badge clipped to a name that wouldn't mean anything to her. Isabel Flores, CEO. She signed her paperwork with a borrowed pen and took the mop cart without a word. Her shifts were overnight. She cleaned boardrooms and hallways, wiped down elevator buttons, and polished the glass railing that looked out over the office I'd built. I never approached her. I never had to. I'd walk through at the end of a long day, heels echoing down the hallway, and sometimes I'd see her just ahead. Hunched over, pulling trash bags from under desks she would have once deemed beneath her. She never looked up. Not once. But I saw her, and I made sure she saw me. Not in confrontation, but in contrast. Me in quiet conversations with executives. Me in the elevator with the mayor's aide. Me handing a promotion letter to a former incubator mentee. Right in the same corridor where Lorna now scrubbed the floors. Funny, I murmured to myself one night, heels clicking past the conference room glass. Karma doesn't always wear orange jumpsuits. Sometimes it wears bad shoes and a name tag. Sometimes it mops floors. Sometimes it shows up exactly where you tried to erase someone, only now you're the one they don't see. I didn't smile at her, I didn't gloat, but I made sure to hold the door open long enough for her to notice the CEO placard by my office. Let it land slowly, let it sting. She hadn't stolen my future. She'd simply delayed my arrival. The building had a way of carrying voices. Not loudly, just enough that a stray word, a misplaced complaint, found its way into the right ears, or in Lorna's case, the wrong ones. It started with a whisper from a facilities manager, then a side comment from HR, a little note in a weekly staff update. Janitorial staff member has been making unprofessional remarks during breaks, mentions of a former stepdaughter, tone derogatory. I didn't flinch when I read it. Apparently, Lorna had started talking. She ran off when she was 17, she told someone in the supply closet. Ungrateful little brat, always playing victim, probably ended up on drugs. Another time, she muttered, girl couldn't handle rules. Made my husband feel guilty for being a decent parent. And my favorite, said with a chuckle to a coworker refilling paper towels, she thought she was in the will. Burn that bridge real quick. The irony would have been funny if it weren't so familiar. Lorna didn't just rewrite history. She broadcasted it, like repetition could make it true. But I didn't respond. Not publicly, not yet. I let her keep talking. Let her paint the version of me she needed to believe. Because what people don't realize, what Lorna never understood, is that silence isn't submission. It's surveillance. And I'd been listening. I had HR flag the comments. I had transcripts pulled from hallway camera audio. I had a memo ready for legal just in case she escalated. But mostly, I waited. Because some lessons land better when you let them echo first. She still hadn't connected the dots. She didn't recognize the woman who walked past her in pumps and a charcoal blazer. Didn't pause at the name on the office door. But that wouldn't last much longer. I drafted a calendar invite. Subject, performance review, L. Gates. Time, 4 p.m. Room, Executive Suite B, my office. I added a note at the bottom. Please come prepared to discuss workplace conduct and professionalism. Then I clicked send. She was 5 minutes early. Her shoes squeaked on the hardwood. She knocked once, hesitated, then pushed open the door like she wasn't sure if this was the right room or the right reality. When her eyes met mine, everything stilled. Her posture stiffened, her mouth opened, then closed. She looked older than I remembered, more tired, more brittle. But the recognition was instant, like a mirror cracking in slow motion. Have a seat, I said calmly, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She sat without speaking, hands folded tight in her lap. I don't need to introduce myself, do I? I asked. She shook her head. The silence between us felt louder than anything she'd ever shouted at me. I leaned forward slightly, measured. This is a standard review. We do them with all employees, regardless of position. But I'll admit, yours is overdue. She glanced at the wall, at the ceiling. Anywhere but at me. I let the pause stretch long enough to become uncomfortable. I've heard some of the things you've said in the break rooms, I continued, about your stepdaughter. No denial, just a flicker in her expression, shame trying to find a place to hide. You never asked where I ended up, I said. Didn't think to check who signed your employment approval or whose name is on the company charter. She swallowed. I didn't know. No, I said. You didn't look. She leaned forward slightly. I was going through a lot back then. Your father... My father left me everything, I cut in. He made sure of it. You just never gave me time to open the letter. Her eyes widened, and for the first time, she looked afraid. Not of me, of what I knew. I opened the folder on my desk, slowly. Here's the thing, I said. I'm not here to punish you. I don't need to. I slid a printout across the table. This is your reassignment notice. Effective next week, you'll be transferred to night shift sanitation. Restroom rotation, 0 public access. She didn't move. I closed the folder. Consider it a demotion, one you earned. And still, I didn't raise my voice, because power whispered louder than she ever screamed. She broke within minutes. The bravado cracked first, her shoulders slumping, her voice trembling around rehearsed excuses. Then the tears came. Not loud, not performative, just soft, shaky sobs that barely reached across the desk. I didn't know what I was doing, she whispered. I was grieving. Your father had just died, and everything was falling apart. I panicked. I didn't move. She leaned forward, trying to close the space between us. I thought you'd be fine. I thought maybe the trust didn't matter. My eyes didn't leave hers. You burned a letter that could have changed my life. She blinked. I made a mistake. No, I said, my voice steady. You made a decision, but here's what you didn't do. I pulled the small recorder from the corner of my desk and tapped it once. Its red light blinked calmly between us. You didn't stop me. You started me. Her breath caught. I'm recording this conversation, I continued, for internal documentation. You were informed of that when you signed your employee contract. She opened her mouth, but I kept going. You also signed an agreement affirming that all information on your application was true to the best of your knowledge. that you disclosed any prior relationships with leadership and any relevant personal history that could affect company dynamics. Her face paled. I didn't think. I know, I said. You never do. I let the silence stretch just long enough. Then, you'll be meeting with HR this afternoon. They'll go over next steps. Her voice dropped, low and cracked. Please. I've lost everything already. The house, the money. He left me with nothing. I didn't flinch. So did you. She shook her head, looking down at the floor between us like she could fall into it. I was wrong. About you. I thought you'd disappear. I did, I said quietly, and then I rebuilt myself, brick by brick, while you weren't looking. The irony was sharp, but I didn't twist it. I just stood, calm and composed, and opened the door to the hallway. You can let HR know when you're ready. She didn't move, but I did, and this time, I was the one closing the door behind her. The HR meeting lasted 12 minutes. It could have taken longer, but Lorna didn't argue. Maybe it was the folder already open on the desk. Maybe it was the printout of her signed code of conduct or the calm way the HR director spoke. Measured, polite, unwavering. Due to your failure to disclose a personal relationship with a member of company leadership, he said, and your violation of our employee integrity clause, you're being offered 2 options. Lorna sat stiffly, arms crossed, her voice flat. I didn't lie. You omitted, he replied, and you've since made multiple inappropriate comments on company grounds. Her jaw clenched. The director slid 2 papers across the table. Option 1, voluntary resignation, effective immediately, no severance, no reference. Her fingers twitched. Option 2, reassignment, night shift, custodial rotation, half pay, no benefits for the next 6 months. He let the weight of it settle. You'll report to a different supervisor, no access to executive floors, and per company policy, you'll sign a formal performance agreement acknowledging misconduct. She didn't speak, just stared at the options like they were written in a language she used to understand but no longer recognized. I watched from the doorway, silent, unseen by her but not by HR. They'd asked if I wanted to sit in. I said no. She didn't need my presence. The truth was louder than I'd ever need to be. After another pause, she reached for the pen. Her signature was slower this time, like she'd finally realized the weight behind every name you write beside your own. The director nodded. You'll receive your new schedule by end of day. She stood, folding the paper with trembling hands. No one escorted her out. She walked the same hallway she'd once glided down in heels and perfume, back when she wore control like jewelry. Now she wore defeat, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet, complete. I stepped aside as she passed me in the corridor. She glanced up, just once. Our eyes met. I didn't smile, I didn't blink. I just kept walking toward the executive wing, because this story didn't end with her punishment. It began with my survival. And now it was unfolding in boardrooms she'd never be allowed to enter again. It was just past 9 p.m. when I walked through the building. Most of the offices were dark, the hallways quiet except for the low hum of printers and the soft rhythm of someone mopping the east corridor. I didn't expect to see her, but there she was, Lorna, alone, bucket beside her, head down as she moved the mop back and forth in long, mechanical strokes. She didn't see me at first, or maybe she did and pretended not to. Either way, I kept walking until I was close enough for her to hear my voice. You told me I had nothing. She froze. The mop handle paused mid-swipe. Her eyes didn't lift. She didn't speak. I took another step. But now I have everything, I said, my voice steady, calm, and I built it myself. Still, she said nothing. She couldn't. Because what do you say when the lie you used to push someone down becomes the reason they climbed? She didn't cry, didn't beg. The part of her that might have once clawed for dignity was too tired now, worn down by silence, routine, the kind of work that doesn't ask for resumes, just hands and hours. I didn't stay long. I didn't need to. Her presence wasn't a threat anymore. It was just a reminder of everything I'd outgrown. I walked the rest of the hallway slowly, heels clicking against the freshly mopped tile. The scent of industrial cleaner followed me, sharp and familiar, but it didn't sting the way it used to. Not anymore. That was the last time I ever spoke to her. Some stories don't need final chapters. Some just fade quietly, like the echo of a woman who once held the matches and now holds the mop. The building on Halston had been quiet for years. It still had the same bones, brick walls, old beams, creaky stairs, but it carried a different energy now, not forgotten, just waiting. I stood in the front doorway with a set of keys in one hand and a blueprint in the other. This time, I wasn't renovating for profit. I was rebuilding for purpose. We turned the upper floors into temporary housing units, warm beds, soft lights, locked doors that only opened from the inside. The downstairs became a job training center, computer labs, mentorship spaces, interview prep rooms, all funded quietly through the foundation I'd created under a name no one could trace back to Lorna Gates. The women who came through the doors weren't unlike me at 17, some fresh out of foster care, others leaving shelters, group homes, places that never gave them more than survival. Here, they got more. They got strategy, skills, stability. We didn't fix anyone, we equipped them. And on the wall inside the entryway, mounted on polished wood and etched in brass, was the first plaque I ever had made. It didn't carry my name. It didn't need to. It read, "For every girl who was told she had nothing, here's proof that you have everything you need." When visitors asked who it was dedicated to, I just smiled and said, "Someone who survived." The building never made headlines, but it made possibilities, and that was more than enough. I walked the halls every so often, not as a CEO, not as a donor, just as a woman who remembered what it felt like to be forgotten. And every time I saw a young woman learning how to balance a budget, nail a job interview, or unlock her first apartment door, I felt it. Not triumph, peace. The kind that comes when you turn your past into a place someone else can begin. The ballroom was filled with glass and light. Rows of executives, investors, and rising founders filled the seats, their faces expectant, notebooks ready. The Business Leadership Summit had flown me in to speak about resilience, strategy, and scaling with integrity. They called me a self-made success. I thought about that phrase as I stepped up to the podium. There's no such thing as self-made. We're all shaped by people. Some who lift us, others who try to bury us. "I want to talk," I began, "about a woman who tried to take everything from me." The audience hushed. She didn't succeed, but she gave me something I didn't expect, the gift of clarity, of motivation, of understanding exactly what kind of woman I never wanted to become. I didn't name her. I didn't need to. She burned the first page of my story, so I wrote the rest in ink she couldn't touch. Applause came slow, then strong, but I didn't let it settle too long. I wasn't there to impress. I was there to remind that the hardest stories to carry can also become the most powerful ones to share. That night, I returned to the office late, still wearing the heels, the fitted suit, the soft gold watch that had once been my father's. The halls were quiet. Past the executive suites, the marketing wing, the glass-walled boardroom, I walked toward the service corridor where the janitorial team clocked out at the end of their shift. She was there, Lorna. Hair pulled back, uniform creased, hands dry from bleach and repetition. She didn't look up as I passed. Maybe she couldn't, maybe she wouldn't. And I didn't stop, and I didn't gloat. I just glanced her way, briefly, and smiled. Not cruel, not smug, just a smile that held all the things she never expected me to become. I reached the elevator and pressed the button. the hum of fluorescent lights overhead. As the doors opened, I glanced back once, watching her disappear into the quiet of her chore. Funny, I murmured under my breath, how some things clean themselves up. The door slid shut, and I rode upward, leaving the past where it belonged, on the floor,